Thank you, Rabbi JP. It's a real honor to be back in Boston. As you heard, I did live in Boston when I went to law school, and I have 3 very, very happy years remembering Boston. But Baruch Hashem, it's very nice to come back and see the tremendous growth Jewishly of the community here, and J Pulse is obviously a major player in that growth. Having lived in Israel for 2.5 years, I'm less involved in the day-to-day American political scene than I used to be. I understand that there is a contest in 2 weeks between a guy called Obama and a guy called Romney, and that's of some importance. Of course, in Israel, this election does have considerable importance. I'm not going to endorse a candidate, but you can guess who most Israelis hope will be elected. But again, I'm not going to be in the business of political endorsements. But what I want to talk today about is really offer some general perspectives on Judaism and politics. And my conclusion is unfortunately not going to be a very exciting one, and that is, we could pose the question, is the Torah blue state or red state? And the short answer is that the Torah is purple state. One has to be very, very careful in listing God on the side of a particular political candidate. We sometimes find that all Jews should support X, or all Jews should support Y, or all Christians, good Christians should subscribe in a certain way. And although the Torah does have a distinct political philosophy, we will find that that political philosophy does not necessarily dictate how those values are to be implemented, and there is room for debate. And therefore, the Torah does envision that a healthy society will have a diversity of viewpoints, even within the overall moral structure that the Torah is creating. Therefore, one has to be very, very careful not to enlist God in the cause of partisan politics. And let me start off with the fact that if you go back to Talmudic sources, you discover that the rabbis had a great deal of ambivalence about the political system. Of course, the system they were talking about was the Roman domination of what was then called Palestine. And I'm just going to quote 2 statements in rabbinic literature. One statement is in Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot, in which one of the rabbis warns us, Al titfadal l'reshut, do not get overly familiar with the governmental authorities at any one time. She'ein mekarvin li adam elo l'tzorech atzmo, that if they do you any favors, it is only for their benefit, it is not for your benefit. As the old saying goes, politics are nations, politics generally has no friends, there are only interests, etc. And therefore Chazal, our sages, were very, very cautious about not getting overly committed with putting your eggs in one basket, because in the short term you might benefit, in the long term there might be a change of leadership, which in Rome was not through election but typically through decapitation, execution, crucifixion, or the like. But be it as it may, when you're overly committed to one side of the equation and you don't spread your contacts, there is the great danger that your influence will be sharply curtailed. There is a second interesting rabbinical source. Do you remember in the Bible we read about the rebellion of Korach? Korach was a cousin of Moshe, and he wanted to challenge Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership. And he had a number of followers, but initially the Torah describes a man who was called On ben Peles. He's only mentioned once in the Chumash, and he is described as a person who originally joined the Korach rebellion, but he then seems to have disappeared from sight. We don't hear about him again. And the Talmud basically says that his wife talked him out of it by basically making the argument, hey, this is a power struggle between Korach and Moshe. You're going to be a nobody no matter what happens. If Korach wins, you're going to be nobody, and if you side with Korach and Moshe wins, it's even going to be worse. So what's the point? So you see that the rabbis had a certain amount of hesitation, equivocation about the political process, and yet at the same time, Chazal, again, Chazal is just an abbreviation, Chachamenu Zechronim Levracha, our sages of blessed memory, Chazal did appreciate the blessings of stable government and rule of law, ironically, even when the government is oppressive. The old saying about Mussolini, he made the trains run on time, etc. Chazal do articulate that type of idea, that there is a certain repose that is created through stability and orderliness which is necessary for the healthy functioning of society. Again, I quote Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot says, Have mitpalel b'shloma shel malchutz. A Jew should always pray for the welfare of a government, because without the fear of the government, ish es re'eyu chayim b'la'o, each man would simply swallow up the other man. There would be anarchy, there would be lawlessness. Society would simply disintegrate. Chazal appreciated the notion of stability. That is why there's a halachic rule, which is sometimes violated, but it is a halachic rule, called dina de malchuta dina. A religious Jew is obligated, as a matter of religious law, to obey the civil, secular laws of society. So, for example, if I evade my income taxes, not only am I violating Title 26, the Internal Revenue Code, but in fact I'm violating Jewish law, because Jewish law requires that I obey the laws of the government. When the Jews went into exile at the time of the destruction of the first temple, and they went to Babylonia in 586 BCE, the prophet Jeremiah told them, Dirshu Shalom Ha'ir, seek the welfare of the communities to which you're going to be exiled. Don't simply forget about your country and only where you're going and only think about going back to Israel. While you're in Galut, whether it's for the long term or the short term, be involved, cultivate society, contribute. Understand that in the success of the collective endeavor will also lie the happiness of the individual as well. Dirshu Shalom Ha'ir, one of the 7 Noachide laws, which everyone in the world is supposed to obey, Jew and non-Jew, is to create a society of equity and justice and fairness. And therefore it is part of a Jewish religious tradition to try to do that. In fact, Maimonides writes that Jews have a halachic obligation to assist general societies, not in becoming Jewish, because we don't proselytize, but in fulfilling the imperatives of justice and equality that are under the Noachide law. That is why it is sometimes said that an attorney who lawfully participates, so to speak, in advancing the causes of law and justice, and again, whether a given attorney does that is a matter of debate in any given case, but is actually fulfilling a certain religious imperative of facilitating and enhancing the Noachide directive of justice and equality. So, therefore, in a sense, I think we would have to say that although Chazal had a certain ambivalence about the political process, they saw it as at least potentially beneficial in terms of, number one, creating stability, number two, enhancing equality, and number three, creating justice, at least when it's functioning at its best. And a Jew does have a religious obligation to be part of that endeavor. And I should say that certainly if this was true under the Roman conditions, which were hardly a democracy, it would certainly be true in a society like the United States, which is described by our great Gedolim as a Malchut Shel Chesed, which means a benevolent government that at least formally is committed to the notion of equality, and therefore it is considered to be a religious duty on some level to participate in the electoral process, at least to vote, if nothing else, but to indeed support those policies that in one's judgment advance the cause of justice, equality, liberty, and the like.